Chapter 11 New Banner of the House Bolton. Winterfell Castle. POV of Eddard Stark. Ned was standing in the courtyard along with his lady wife and their 3 children Robb, Sansa, and baby Arya. Just a few minutes ago, the giant eagle that he had come to associate with Domeric Bolton entered the Maester's rookery with a message on his leg, claiming that Lord Bolton and his entourage would arrive in Winterfell within half an hour. He knew that it was not necessary for him to wait for one of his own bannermen like this. But House Bolton was one of the greatest houses in the north, second only to the Starks, and he knew that he needed to show his respects to Lord Bolton even if the lord in question was just a 7-year-old boy. The guards had already announced that Lord Bolton's party of 20 men was already within sight. Arya squirmed uncomfortably under her mother's grip, and he let out a sigh before giving Cat a sympathetic look. Of all the children that were born to them so far, Arya was the one that gave them the most trouble. He just hoped that she would grow up fast or all the hairs on his head would become gray before long. It was then that he heard the beat of hoofs coming closer to them and looked up to see their guests and froze. A silence descended upon the courtyard as a large black direwolf entered the Winterfell gates with a snarl on its face, and Ned felt intimidated by the sight. He was the veteran of a war, was the Lord Paramount and Warden of the North, and had killed numerous men in life, and he still felt intimidated. And not only at the sight of the direwolf but also at the boy who was riding the direwolf with such ease and grace as if he had been riding one since his birth. There was just something about that boy that screamed danger to his senses, and when their eyes met, time stopped. Ned Stark felt naked as the boy gazed into his eyes, as if each and every single one of his secrets were laid bare in front of the boy, and as if hearing his thoughts. The boy's lips quirked in a slight smile and then averted his gaze from him, and Ned let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. But despite the fact that the boy was now observing the rest of his household, there was a slight pressure on him, as if he was standing in the presence of a king and not a 7-year-old boy. And then the boy smiled, and the pressure was gone. The time that seemed to have stilled until this point started to flow as the boy descended from the black direwolf. A direwolf that could easily kill him and the rest of his family before his household guards even had the chance to take out their blades. A direwolf that was the sigil and symbol of House Stark. And a direwolf that now belonged to Lord Bolton. He wondered if this was a show of power on the young Bolton's part. If he wanted to show off his direwolf and tell him that he was better than them. There was also the question of how on earth the boy did find a direwolf south of the wall. And how was he able to tame it? Then his eyes went to the banner that his men were flying, and he was surprised to see that instead of the flayed man like he had been expecting, there was now a weirwood tree in the banner with a black background. He had not known that the Boltons had changed their banner. And the fact that the boy had done so on his own violation clearly spoke of him having enough conviction to change his house and create a whole new reputation. A reputation that he would have never gained if he had continued to fly the flayed man banner. There were so many questions running through his mind, but as the boy climbed down from the direwolf and moved toward him along with his retainers, Ned forced those thoughts to the back of his mind for later. Then the boy looked into his eyes and held eye contact for a second before he went down on his knees. An action that was then followed by the rest of his men, except for the woman whom he remembered as Lady Barbary Dustin. Then Lord Bolton spoke his oath of allegiance, a short ceremony. And once it was done, Lord Bolton and Lady Barbary, along with the rest of his guards, were taken to the Great Hall for a feast. Later that evening, Lord Bolton and Lady Barbary arrived in his solar, and they talked about various things. He was often forgetting that Domeric was only a 7-year-old child and not an adult because of how mature and intelligent he was. By the end of their discussion, Lady Barbary Dustin had become the official regent of Lord Bolton, and he had signed the charter for the expansion of Dreadfort into a town, as well as the charter for creating a port town at the mouth of the Weeping Water River. He was not sure exactly why he did that. Signing a charter like this to a house that was once the enemy of the Starks was not a wise thing to do. He just knew that the young Lord Bolton could really be persuading when he wanted to be. The next day, Lord Bolton and his entourage left Winterfell, and he was left with the feeling that instead of dooming his house as most boy lords did, Domeric Bolton was going to change his house for the better. Chapter 12 Bloodraven. Winterfell Castle. POV of Eddard Stark. "What are you thinking about my love?" Cat asked as they finished their lovemaking, and she laid on his chest. He stayed silent for a moment, thinking about the young lord who left Winterfell early in the morning after he gave his oath and finished his business in Winterfell. Domeric Bolton, he said, and left it at that. There were so many things about the young lord that he didn't even know where to begin. Domeric. He seemed like a good boy, so intelligent and mature for his age. And to have lost both his parents at such a young age. Cat said with a hint of sympathy in her voice. I wonder what our little Rob would have done if he lost both his parents at such a young age. Would he mature as fast as Domeric? She asked while looking into his eyes, and he held a sigh at that. Of course, Kat, being a woman and a mother, would sympathize with the recently orphaned boy. But was that all she noticed when she looked at the boy? Didn't she notice the dire wolf he was riding? Or how he gave off an aura of intimidation? Despite being escorted by Lady Barbary Dustin, it was clear that all the Bolton men answered to him and him only. To see grown men have such loyalty for a young boy was both fascinating and worrying. The decision to change the banner was not anything that just about anyone could make either. After all, the banners of a house are what give them their identity. House Stark had gained the direwolf for its sigil because it was said that their ancestors rode giant direwolves in battle. He had believed that to be mere rumors and legends until today when he saw young Lord Bolton riding the black direwolf. House Bolton had similarly gained its sigil because of its practice of flaying their enemies. A practice that was only outlawed about a few hundred years ago, and something that the Boltons were said to have still performed inside closed doors. Changing a house's sigil was not something that could be done lightly, especially by someone whose position was not secure within his own household. So, either Domeric Bolton was a stupid boy who didn't know what he was doing, or he was very smart and had the loyalty of most of the people in Dreadfort. He wanted to believe the truth to be the former one, but for some reason, he had a feeling that it was the latter. But what could he do about it, even if it is latter? He couldn't make things difficult for Boltons just like that. That wouldn't be honorable. But did that mean he had to watch from the side, and couldn't do anything about it? If he was sure that House Bolton wouldn't make things difficult in the north, then he could be calmer. But will the Boltons just sit in their castle and be peaceful with their growing power? He could be less anxious if any other house, but Starks didn't have a good history with Boltons, and with a Stark hater regent, could things go better? He clutched Kat tightly to his chest, her warm body calming his frantic heart as he thought about the charters for the expansion of Dreadfort and the port town. He wondered if the boy would even use those parchments. A new town around the castle and a new port town at the mouth of the river. How many years they will take and how many resources Boltons had to use to build these towns. Maybe it was a good thing to sign those parchments. If the Boltons had to use their time and resources for the towns, they couldn't make things hard for him, right? I don't know, Kat, he said, and then kissed her soft lips gently. I hope that we live a long life, and Rob won't have to pick up the mantle of the Lord of House Stark for many years. She gave him a small smile and then kissed him on the neck, eliciting a moan from him before she removed the blanket covering them and sat down on his lap. It seemed that he would have to work extra hard to please his lady wife tonight. True North Beyond the Wall. POV of Bloodraven. Interesting. Very interesting. That boy. Something is different about him. He is like someone not real but also real. Like he doesn't blend into this world. But that's not all. He is like someone who has chosen. But by whom? Gods? People? Fate? Murmured Bloodraven. What are you talking about, Raven? Someone called him. Leaf, I can feel something's changed. Things are changing in this world, he said. Does it matter to us? We don't care about the world outside anymore, she said. Don't be so sure about it, Leaf. Something is changing about the fate of this world. Maybe even your folk will be affected. After all, how can people fight against their fate? He asked himself more than Leaf. Now she seemed a little concerned, an emotion he hadn't seen on her face for a long time. What kind of change? Is it bad or good? She asked. Who knows? For some people it might be good and might be bad for others, or bad for everyone and good for no one. Only time will tell, he said, and didn't speak after that. What are you going to do, Domeric Bolton? What path will you follow? Will you stand on my path? If you will, then... Chapter 13. Are you serious, Auntie? On the road to Dreadfort Castle. POV of Domeric Bolton. We shouldn't have left so early after meeting with Lord Stark. Aunt Barbary gently chided as they made camp in one of the clearings near the grass trail which these people call road as the sun fell. It can be considered rude. Lord Stark is not the kind of person who would take offense over things like this. He told her as he tried to recall all the knowledge he had from his past life that he could use in this world. Despite having a very firm grasp of occlumency and having an eidetic memory, he still chose to take note about of his ideas and plans. It was important to write down his ideas to gain a clear image. And how would you know that? She scoffed, but not in a mocking manner. How long have you known Lord Stark for? Long enough to take his measure. He said, don't worry. If anything, Lord Stark was relieved that we were about to leave his castle at once when all the business was done. He was rather intimidated by my direwolf. She rolled her eyes at his words. He was intimidated by Grim because he had a good brain inside his head. If he was not fearful of it, then I would think that living with the Tully bitch has addled his brain. She said with a hint of bitterness in her voice, and he sensed some pain and a lot of resentment in her mind. He would have used legitimacy to find out why she hated the Tullys, but she was kind of a mother figure to him, and he would rather not invade her privacy for such a simple reason. You don't like the Tullys? He asked. Yes, I don't like those fucking opportunistic bastards. Fucking Hoster Tully, who sold his bitch daughter to get his paws at the north. She said before she suddenly remembered something and looked him over as if just remembering that she was talking with a 7-year-old child and not an adult. But you don't need to hear about all that. Tell me, how did you like Winterfell? I didn't. He answered with a shrug. It's just as unimpressive as Dreadfort. There were no modern toilets, no modern bathrooms or showers, and many more modern facilities. Of course, both Winterfell and Dreadfort castles were unimpressive in his eyes. Also, if we were talking about castles, he saw and lived in Hogwarts, a magical castle, for 7 years. So there is no need to even compare. But wait till he improves the Dreadfort castle. When the time came, even kings would be jealous of life at the Dreadfort castle, his home. She raised an eyebrow at that, but didn't comment on his words and instead asked, "And what about young Lady Sansa? Did you like her? Cute little child. She's probably grown up to be like her mother. The Tully might be a bitch, but she was a well-bred bitch. She would definitely be a beauty when she grows up. Do you want her? You're not honestly asking me if I want a 4-year-old child, are you?" He asked, giving her a "are you serious" glance, and she waved her hands away as if it was unimportant. Children grow up fast. And you have grown up faster than others. Sooner or later, you'll have to get married to someone. And what other best choice than the daughter of a Stark? You go on and on about changes every day. How about marrying a Stark to a Bolton? That would be a good change for everyone in the North, I reckon, she said, and he let out a groan. Let's not talk about my marriage life just yet, okay? He said as he went back to writing the formula for gunpowder. He didn't plan on introducing firearms to this world anytime soon, but it was always a good thing to keep your options open. All right then, if you want to be craven about it, then tell me, why did you have him sign the charter for Port City? You're seriously not thinking about creating a port in the Weeping Water River, are you? Port town, he corrected. And yes, I am. You do know that a port town like this might take a lifetime to create, right? She asked. I know. Of course, he knew that creating a port town at the mouth of the river would take a lifetime. But that was valid for others, not for himself. Still, he didn't explain to his aunt, because he knew that she wouldn't believe him until she saw with her own eyes. Are you really only going to give me 2-word answers? She asked. Yes, he said with a wink, and she rolled her eyes and got up from the trunk they were sitting upon. I'm tired from all the riding. If you want something, then just call me, she said, and sidestepped Grim by a good amount before going to the tent that her guards had set up in the fields alongside that of his. He gave her a negligent nod before going back to his notes. He had to transfigure a notebook and pen for himself, as such things didn't exist in this world. Oh, old brown papers and quills were lying around, but they were not of good quality and the paper was very expensive, so he had to use permanent transfiguration and transmutation to make them. He gave one last look to Grim, who was resting behind him and keeping its ears open for any bandit of wild animal roaming around these parts, and then went back to doing his own thing. Chapter 14, Mines and Trainers. Somewhere on the Bolton lands. POV of Domeric Bolton. This is the spot, Domeric said, and stopped the direwolf as he looked down from a small hill. The men riding behind him stopped as well, and one of the men whom he had selected because of his literacy came in front of him and started looking at the area before he found out the exact location and made a black dot in the map and wrote down the description of the area. Which one is this, my lord? He asked after finishing the description on the parchment, and Domeric let a feral smile grace his lips and said, Silver. Silver, my lord? He asked in surprise, and Domeric smiled back at him. Yes, I had heard that Lord Manderley had 2 silver mines in his lands, but had not thought that I would find some in my lands as well. Regardless, this is a pleasant surprise and a boon that I intend to take full benefit of. Then he looked back at the man once again. Make it a priority and send 1/3 of our miners here. I want them to open a mine and start the extraction of silver, or as quickly as possible. Yes, my lord, he said, and bowed his head before writing down his instructions. Domeric frowned and thought about the problems that were rising in front of him. The biggest problem was a lack of miners. So far, the Bolton lands only had 2 iron mines which were used to provide all the steel that their men needed. But within the span of a month, he had managed to uncover 17 places with high ore deposits in the Bolton lands. For now, they only have enough miners to open 3 more mines if they stretch the numbers. And he was under no illusion that the work wouldn't be slow. He needed more miners, something that he could ask for from the other great and minor neighboring houses. Of course, he would have to pay a good amount of gold for that. Not to mention that the men he would need to recruit to work in the new mines would need to be paid a good amount of gold as well. The Boltons had enough wealth to open half a dozen mines without decreasing the gold by a significant amount. After all, the Boltons may not be particularly rich, but they were a great house with a history as long as the Starks. But that much wealth would not be enough to fund the larger projects that he had in mind. Although he could simply transfigure dirt into gold, the transfiguration spell would break if someone damaged the coins too much. So, he had no choice but to either borrow the gold from other sources or steal from others. He decided that he would do both. But in order to do that, he would have to either go to King's Landing, which had the largest amount of gold flowing through it at any given moment, or go across the narrow sea and deal with either the Iron Bank or the other smaller Tyroshi banks. It was time for him to step up and start traveling the world. He also knew that ship travel during this era took a significant amount of time, so he wanted to start another one of his plans before he left. But first, he needed to return to the castle and meet his new trainers. Yes, his trainers finally arrived at the castle today. After the visit to the Winterfell castle, when they returned to the Dreadfort, he talked with his aunt about his training. And just like he thought, his aunt was excited even more than himself. If he didn't stop her, she would send men to both Westeros and Essos to invite the most famous mentors available. But he didn't want to be trained by the most famous mentors, so he stopped her and told her to find people with battlefield veterans who have teaching abilities. First of all, it was hard to make a deal with famous mentors, and time-consuming to get them here. Secondly, these famous mentors would not just train him but also impose their own styles on him, and that was something he didn't want to happen. He wanted to create his own style of melee fight and after that combine his melee skills and magic skills to become a magic fighter. For that, he needed to improve his basic skills to perfection. So, he told his aunt that he would choose mentors himself when the time came and asked her to find some people to his criteria. She accepted his request, albeit reluctantly. And finally, today people he asked to find from his aunt came to his territory. And today he will take his first training. A sword and shield master, a master spearman, a master archer, and a Dothraki who is a master at horse riding. All 4 of them were retired veteran mercenaries who had fought on the battlefield and trained other sellswords at their camp in the past. They kind of both lucky and unlucky people. They were lucky because they didn't die till today even though they were a mercenary. And they were unlucky because they were old now and couldn't fight on the battlefield anymore. So, this was a good opportunity for them as a safe and well-paying job. He will learn their sword and shield mastery, spear mastery, archery, horse riding skills, and jousting mastery from them. Even though he didn't want to admit it, he was excited a little. Time to become a badass. Chapter 15: Green Revolution and Hygiene Policies. Dreadfort Castle. POV of Domeric Bolton. Are you not done yet? Aunt Barbary asked as he continued to carve runes in the glasshouse that he had recently built inside Dreadfort with the use of transfiguration magic. The sole purpose of the glasshouse was to act as an experimental lab for growing high-yielding variety seeds that would increase the production of grain by a significant amount by the time he returned from his voyage. With the help of the runes and the heartwood tree that supplied it with constant magic, the glasshouse would increase the growth of the wheat to the point where it turned from a seed into a crop ready for harvest within a single day. After selecting the grain from the plant with the largest amount of yield, the grain would then be planted once again in the glasshouse the very next day. Selected breeding in such a manner would see the quality of wheat rise by a significant amount within a short time. In short, if he went on a 2-month voyage, then by the time he returned to Dreadfort, the wheat in the glasshouse would have already gone through 60 cycles of selective breeding. Yes, that's the last one, he said as he finished the last stroke in the glasshouse with the magical ink that he had created from the weirwood sap. It was a far cry from the magical ink that he used in his past life, which was made of dozens of carefully selected magical ingredients, but it did its job. Are you sure you don't want me to come with you? Aunt Barbary asked, looking a bit worried. I'm sure. I know that this task might not sound very important, but I assure you that a green revolution is one of the greatest things that I'll bring to this world. After the printing press, steam engine, industrial revolution, and an education system, of course. he said with a smile, and his aunt simply rolled her eyes at his words, as she didn't really understand what he meant by the last few words. So, I just need to follow your instructions and make sure that the glasshouse is provided with enough horse manure every day? She asked with a bit of disgust, and he nodded. Yes, and if you don't understand something, then just contact me with the mirror like I showed you last evening. Are you sure that the mirror will work from such large distances? She asked, and he simply shrugged. In theory, it should. But I've never done this before, so I can't say for sure. He said, regardless, your task is not that hard. Keep doing what I taught you and you'll be just fine. As you wish, my lord, she said with a mock courtesy before pinching both his cheeks, something that both irritated and amused him to no end. Oh, by the way, there is one more thing I want you to take care of while I am away, he said. You will really work me to death, aren't you? What is it this time? My notes in my solar. I'll give them to you after we arrive there, he said while walking toward his solar with his aunt. On the way they talked about small things like his training or what he should pay attention to on his journey. After a while they arrived at his solar. Dom Eric took out the key hanging around his neck, opened one of the locked drawers, took a transfigured notebook, and gave it to his aunt. She didn't say anything and just began to read his notes. But after a while her eyebrows started to file. He could guess what was going through her mind. Are you serious? Why would we do something like this for small folks? This is not a small expense, Dom Eric. This is going to cost a lot of gold for us. He expected this reaction from her because that notebook was about the hygiene politics that he wanted to implement in his lands, including buildings such as public bathhouses and public toilets. I know these will cost us a lot of gold, but it is necessary and must be done. Also, this project of mine is a long-term one. Changing the habits of people and creating new habits will take a lot of time. So, we must begin as soon as possible. He knew very well that implementing this kind of daily life habit-changing policy couldn't be forced in a short time. So, he wanted to implement his policy as soon as possible. People in this world don't pay attention to their hygiene, and there are a lot of illnesses and early deaths because of that. When he creates a city around Dreadfort and a port town, there will be more people who live in these lands, and with time these places will be more crowded. That means a more rapid spread of diseases and the risk of plague. And that is a big no-no for him. These things must be done and done quickly. His aunt looked into his eyes like she wanted to see what he was thinking in his mind. But in the end, she gave up and looked back to the notebook. Why do we have to build these public bathhouses and toilets in the new city and port town? She asked after a while. Well, simply, I want every small folk on my land to be clean, and I don't want people to pollute my land. After we implemented these policies, if anyone pollutes my cities and towns with their piss and poop, they will be fined. Also, some facilities in the cities and ports will not accept dirty people till they clean themselves up. Don't look at me like that. Don't you also want small folk not to be smelly and dirty when they are around you? He said. He knew that one of the reasons she didn't like small folk was because they were smelly and dirty. Humph. And what about boiling water before drinking or cleaning wounds? And why do we have to wash our hands and rinse our mouths before and after eating something? There are a lot of things we can't see in the water that make people sick. We need to kill them with heat. The same reason is also valid for washing hands and rinsing our mouths before eating. To the clean small things make people sick on our hands and in our mouths. As for washing our hands and rinsing our mouths after eating, if people rub their greasy hands through their hair, they can cause their hair to become infested with lice, and if they don't rinse their mouth, their teeth might decay. Dom Eric explained as simply as he could to his aunt patiently. Really? Are there small things that make people sick in the water? She asked with a bewildered face. Yes, there are. Ha! I will arrange builders for public bathhouses and toilets and implement this hygiene policy of yours. But what are these things you want me to buy and stockpile as discreetly as possible? She asked while looking at the list of things that his nephew wanted to buy and stockpile. Things like animal fat, tea leaves, different kinds of oils, mint, and many more. Oh, these things for making soap, toothpaste, toothbrush, and shampoo. Soap? Can we really make soaps? You know, only lords, ladies, and some rich folk can be able to afford soap, right? And we have to buy them from the free cities across the narrow sea. I don't know about the other things you said, but if we can make soap, we can become one of the wealthiest houses in all Westeros. Shampoo is for cleaning hair, while toothpaste and toothbrush are for teeth. You will love them for sure. And don't worry, we really can make soaps. He said that there were still unspoken things in his mind. I will make soaps, but I don't plan to sell them to rich people at high prices. I need them for my people, so they have to be cheap. Well, she didn't need to know that yet. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, right?